you know, it's something we could take action today. I kind of doubt you'll see a final action from the board today, but I think we'd like to have some discussion and talk about it. And I think that's what's on the agenda here for, as far as I see it. But it's up to the pleasure of the board. So with that, you know, part of what we're looking at is. I think there's a lot of the rural areas feel like their concerns are being overshadowed by urban areas' needs and wants. And if you look at somebody sent me a deal as far as representation that the rural areas have in comparison to urban areas, and it's and I knew it was pretty bad. It's basically I see it as rural areas, for all intents and purposes, really don't have adequate representation of their, at least opportunity. And you have similar situations back in New York State. I was talking to a person, they said New York State's really quite rural. And I said, well, then how do they vote like they vote? Well, New York City carries the whole state and basically dictates to the rest of the area what happens. And I think if you look at the way our nation is set up, I would ask, why do we even have states? What for? Why not just have America, one big deal? Well, the reason why you have states is so it gives areas representation for their areas. Otherwise, you'd have, you'd have people maybe in the West Coast disenfranchised. Well, let's say you may have the West, more like the East Coast, possibly West Coast, absolutely running the whole nation. As is, you have states, and those people could say, hey, this is what we need for our area. And that's the whole idea of having states, having counties, is so you have access to representation. And I think a lot of the rural areas feel we're not getting that access to representation truly. So, you know, that's kind of my thoughts on it, what I see here. And so I'm sure some people would like to come forward, and they might have some information they'd like to bring forth and some thoughts. And I'd like to, unless other board members have some comments.
Well, I'll make a comment that San Andreas, Calaveras County had a presentation by some folks with the Jefferson movement, and this was about a month ago, I think. And I went over to attend it just to try to learn something about what it was all about. I was pretty ignorant on the topic. Had seen things in our last election with the 6-state alternative and some things of that nature. But the one thing that I learned that, to your point about representation, I did not know was that up until 1964, we were at the state level represented more in terms of the fashion that we are represented at the federal level, whereby every state in the nation, regardless of their population size, has 2 senators, and that provides the representation on an equal footing, at least in one of the bodies of the federal government, and in this case, what's considered the deliberative body in the federal Senate. We had that similar scenario here in California and other states across the nation until '64 and until the Reynolds versus Sims decision that brought about both houses of our state government, the Assembly and the state Senate, to be represented on the basis of population rather than equal representation for each subdivision of the state, i.e. counties. So that was, I don't know, it was interesting to me to learn of that. It does seem to speak to the some of the frustrations that we've actually been talking about all day long today, whether it be the water measurement and development regulations or tree mortality emergency proclamations and what we can do about it. I spent the better part of the last 2 years as a representative of this body fighting things at the state level, and some of my fellow supervisors were there with me much of the time. And I think to a person, each one of us came away after testimony at a Senate subcommittee hearing or an Assembly subcommittee hearing or something to that effect, whether it was on wild and scenic or relinquishment of our state highways or any number of issues. You came away with a sense of frustration that you were really just, it was a colossal waste of your time. You went there, you testified, you put forth sound facts in support of your argument. Those that were tasked with making a recommendation to the governor or somebody else could not counter your arguments with arguments of their own, and yet still the vote went right down ideological lines. There was no representation there. It was strictly ideology versus ideology, and the prevailing ideology is that is voted in place by the high population centers of our state. So it really was a frustrating last 2 years.
I would say we had representation there, but not equivalent representation number-wise.
Not balanced, no.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to state that I have been to one of those hearings. I'd like to attend the one coming up. I believe it's on the 17th of this month, and just educate myself a little more on this process before I take a stand one way or the other on it.
I don't know. I was 11 years old in 1964, kind of revealing my age, but I do remember when we did have that system, a senator for each county, and it seemed to work. Government seemed to work a lot better in those days. They worked along partisan lines, and
Well, they had to.
They had to, but I mean, I agree with you, but I mean, it just seemed to be in deadlock anymore with anything, and rural counties seemed to get the shaft more times than not, and Richard and I were talking the other day, and he made a good point too. I mean, would this have changed if we were the state of Jefferson, the relinquishment of Highway 16 to Rancho Cordova? Probably not. So, I myself need to attend one of these and get a little better educated on this as well. But, I think that's an appropriate point. We need to, look at this a little bit more before we take one stand or another.
Oh, and what we're doing, we're starting that conversation. Personally, yeah, I'm interested in looking at it, but also, I'm also a realist. I understand, there's benefits, and there's probably detractions being part of the state. And I think this legislature and the state overall as a whole could probably work a lot more constructively and beneficially to some of the rural areas. And it's like, I think they're not looking at issues we have. They don't have clear vision, clear focus. It'd be like if I was a legislator and if I was operating like some of these legislators I've seen from some of these urban areas, I'd say, well, everybody should have a cow in their backyard, eat the grass, don't have a big fire danger. Well, in the Bay Area, it'd be silly, it'd be ridiculous. But they're passing legislation akin to that, affecting rural areas that, they're looking at urban problems they have, or urban needs, or urban wants, or even urban desires, and they're passing legislation predicated on that sometimes just really cripples rural areas, hurts us. So I think that's one of my big beefs.
Well, yeah, and I think when we did have one senator per county, it made a good offset versus the population, because, one side maybe not come up with the same vote as the population side of the assembly, Then where do you go from there,
Exactly. Then legislation doesn't go through necessarily because it has the more deliberative body looking at it from a balanced perspective of all angles rather than population-weighted one.
At that point in time, 1964, that was the beginning of the end for Senator John Begovich's career, because they come up with districts and reapportioned. He was out. He had a much stronger candidate from a bigger area.
Well, I'm always willing to learn more about most subjects, but I will just say, in summary, how I feel about this issue is that I truly believe united we stand, divided we fall. I'm a big one for collaboration, and I don't think breaking away will truly ultimately solve anybody's problems. That's my opinion.
I'm somewhat of the same mindset that I think we need to see more information on this, and, you know, at some point, this may be the answer. I'm not sure today it's the answer. I feel like we're somewhat throwing in the towel by saying that this is the only way to go. You can look at our state right now, and it is, opinion on your ideology, very good or very bad. For me, in lobbying in Sacramento, we suffered a lot of defeats on very common sense issues. Some of them, like Highway 16, we would have lost that issue anyway if we were in the state of Jefferson, because Sacramento would not be, and they would have gone ahead and got that highway relinquished, at least their portion. Other issues like mining issues, I think we would have an advantage. But even the transportation issue, where we're advocating for increased taxes for transportation, not something that I like doing, asking for increased taxes, but that issue failed in the legislature, not because of the Republicans didn't have enough numbers. It failed because there weren't enough Democrats to sign on to the issue, because there's enough moderate Democrats where their districts that they represent will not support them again if they support a tax increase. Unfortunately, we've got away from that parity in government where it should be closer to 50-50. If you're talking just a two-party system, Republican, Democrat, we were a lot closer to that when we had the last governor I can remember is Governor Deukmejian, where he was a great governor, and we had closer to parity in our legislature. We had better decisions coming out of our legislature. Since then, we've had Governor Brown was before that, but Governor Wilson, and then gone on to Governor Brown, Governor Davis, Governor
Reagan. Reagan was in there somewhere.
Reagan was way before.
Oh, okay.
But Governor
Wilson,
well, and finally Governor Schwarzenegger. And what was Schwarzenegger, Republican or a Democrat? I'm not sure. But if you
depends
look
who
at
he was married to.
where I see the ultimate or the problem started from is with redistricting in 2000, and it became even worse in 2010 with redistricting. I had a discussion with someone I really respected, Senator Dave Cox, on this item during redistricting of 2010, and so our discussion was about 2008 or 2009, and it started off as a discussion in the airport, and by the time we were done, we looked around, and it was like one of those E.F. Hutton commercials where everybody was looking at us. So it had elevated to more than just a discussion, but a heated argument. And I told him at that point, what you're doing with redistricting is protecting all the safe districts and making the Republican Party a minority party forever. They continued on that line, and I'm not right very much, but I think I was right on that one. And what it's going to take is for us to get back to redistricting in the future and redraw the lines so they're more fair, more competitive districts. Some Republicans are going to lose, some Democrats are going to lose, but you need districts that are more fair, but that's complicated because our whole state has become more liberal in the process. If I was going to redraw lines in the street, I'd cut a line right down the middle, and not horizontally, but vertically. Is that going to happen? Who knows? But maybe I'll wait around someday for that to happen.
I just want to make my position clear. You know, I need to know more about this, but having said that, if we can effectuate change to get back to some other type of even form of government, that might be the better way to go, and that's really what I want to say.
I think that's, Louis, I think that's sort of stated in here as scenario 1 versus scenario 2, or plan B as it was explained over if it brings about a re-litigation of the Reynolds versus Sims decision and brings about that parity, at least on one side of the state legislature, with equal representation for each county, I think, that could be one of the upsides to this movement. I'm still trying to look at what are the potential upsides, the degree of potential that I think exists for the upside versus what a downside is. And I'm looking forward to hearing some of that from some of the folks here. I have yet to ascertain a downside from supporting this effort.
I look at the two scenarios. I think the one, to me, would never happen. Our legislature is not going to ratify and pass something that's going to recognize the state of Jefferson. I'm just talking reality.
Yeah, I agree.
But on the other hand, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know. I have to defer to a lawyer and ask, there's existing case law, would there be merit to taking a case like that forward and asking for it to be addressed?
At this point, I haven't delved into this issue at all. I've been dealing with other issues, so I'm not prepared to provide any kind of opinion on that today, so.
You're a better politician than I am.
And I guess the word that we stand is, being government officials taking an oath to uphold the California Constitution and the Constitution of the United States.
Actions are allowed, I think, by both of those articles stated.
Actually, that was one of my questions. Do we have standing, if we wanted to take action on this?
Well, the U.S. Constitution does allow the creation of new states and does set forth the process. So I don't believe that you're violating any Constitution.
And it always has, if you really look back about it and
Yeah.
think about it. States were split up, North Carolina, South Carolina, blah, blah, blah. West Virginia, Virginia.
Much standing is the Pine Grove Business Alliance.
I will say that this again is per your ideology. Some people are happy as clams with the way things are operating in the state, but I think it's just bad government when you have one party that is so dominant and disregards what I feel are just transparent and very common sense issues.
No, I'd agree, Richard. And that's like, down to Capitol has been a few times he's been there, and I can understand if it was on a major issue where you have one side's here and one side's there, Republican Party's here, Democrats there, or vice versa. And if they got in their trenches and said, we're not moving, we're not going to help you because you're going up against our steadfast ideological criteria. But there are some issues where really it wasn't that type. I guess I'm maybe speaking on one thing was Wild and Scenic River. What I saw happen there is went down there and there was representatives there where it didn't really affect them. At that time, I want to say we had Amador County saying, hey, this is going to majorly affect us. And I think Calaveras may have been on board at that time too. Or at least they kind of pulled back and they were more supportive of where we were. And I saw legislators, and I think we made I think Supervisor Plaz spoke there, as did our water agency, and made very valid arguments about how this would harm and affect our county, and
Fell on deaf ears.
it fell on deaf ears, and it was quite dismaying. And on that note, I'd say, I've heard people say, united we stand, divided we fall. I would agree with that, but it also depends on where we're standing and what we're standing for. So I didn't see anybody standing for us, or not. I didn't see the people standing down there to support us. So.
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to follow with the example of State Route 16 has been bannered about, and while I agree that a State of Jefferson wouldn't have changed that outcome, I would say that the total disregard for Amador County's position at the state capitol and all the way up to, the governor's chief advisors was pretty palpable, that total disregard for our concerns about the effects on Amador County. But I wonder if we took and encouraged a large-scale development project right on our western county line on Highway 16, if Sacramento County wouldn't expect the opportunity to have some intergovernmental review of our development project adjacent to their border and want some mitigation measures and monies to alleviate the traffic impacts on that portion of Highway 16 that they've now relinquished. State has now relinquished to Sacramento.
Now, that development project needs to occur in Colusa County next to the ranch owned by the Brown family.
Yeah.
And see what kind of complaints you're going to get at that point.
Suddenly, they'd want inter-county concerns to be weighed on an equal basis, but they didn't want it that way when we were expressing our concerns about relinquishment, so.
I just think, if you look at it rather, how can we say it, just rather simply, as I've heard some people say, and look at the basics. If you have a state that has, each county has a representative, a state senator, everybody has a seat at that table. And then if you have an assembly that's done by population, that's where the population, that's where they can come in and say, hey, we're the major population, that's where the assembly is, and we're representing the population. Then there you'll see both areas are having a representation. As it is now, you have a population that carries basically, the major population centers carry all the representation, and the rural areas, for all intents and purposes, have a little close to nil. And it's not, I don't see it being correct or fair. And I go back to my statement I said before, why not just have one America and not have the states? Because that's basically what you have in California, as far as representation-wise.
Well, I guess you see a classic example of that with the protection of the mountain lion now. And I noticed on the news in Southern California, they're chasing a mountain lion down on a city street. Was trying to catch a skunk. And my point is, they're unprecedented in this county like they never have been before. They're coming into town. They've been spotted in my neighborhood.
I think at this point in time, we've probably pretty well beat it up. Is there any members of the public that would like to speak this event? Or issue, I should say. Please come forward, state your name for the record, and sign in if you would, please.
Catherine Radicinovich. Good afternoon. I am the city chair for the State of Jefferson in Amador County. I've been a resident of Amador County and Calaveras for the past 33 years. Children. I'm also a business owner in Pine Grove, where I currently reside. You guys have all made great points as to the representation, which is what State of Jefferson is about. It's about equal representation. I also believe that this is a nonpartisan movement. It doesn't matter if you're a Republican, Democrat, Independent, it's about the people. It's about us having the right of the way that we live. We're not city dwellers. We have issues in our communities that they don't understand, nor do I understand their issues, and I'm okay with it. That's why I live here. Article 4, Section 3 of the United States Constitution does give California, gives every state the right to separate. That's the basis for how they're going to present this legislation of California. 11 other counties have made their declarations to be on board with this movement. Would be number 12 if we guys decided to do that. I would encourage everybody on the board to come to the town hall meeting November 17th at the Italian Picnic Grounds at 6 p.m. Mark Baird will be there. There'll be questions and answers after his presentation, and he is the main spokesman for this movement. I have flyers for you, if I can present those, and some brochures. Also, one of these supervisors, Supervisor Plaz, has had questions about the financial viability of the state of Jefferson. I took the liberty to print out some copies of the model, financial model, if you guys would like to take a look at those. Who do I give this to?
How many copies do you have, Ken?
One for each of you.
Okay.
Sure.
Off the SOJ 51 website?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, yeah.
Thank you.
There you go. Thank you.
Take a little while to digest, so probably ought to finish with your points.
Well, just one other comment I would like to make was Supervisor Morgan's comment on United, we stand, divided we fall. I completely believe in that. I completely believe that the rural counties of California need to be united, or we will fall with the rest of California. Thank you.
Thank you.
Supervisor Forster's point about the governors, we had presently Jerry Brown, Schwarzenegger before him, Gray Davis, Pete Wilson, George Tukmasian, Jerry Brown again, Ronald Reagan, and Edmund G. Pat Brown. Recent history. Google's good for something.
Hi, I'm Kimberly Whitley from Fiddletown. Can you hear me in this microphone?
Yeah. What was the name?
Kimberly Whitley, Fiddletown.
Thank you.
I want to make clear that I do not hold a political party. There is a huge issue.
Got to speak right into that mic, they can't hear you.
There's a huge issue that's been neglected in this county for years. And I want it made clear that I usually don't support political movements, which this is not a political movement. But in this case, to resolve this issue, I'm hoping that I could at least bend your ear to maybe considering the state of Jefferson. The state of California for many years has succeeded in limiting the freedoms of rural counties and taken on a disinterest in meeting the needs of our communities. Rather than reading an enormous list of limitations put on us by the state and those in legislative bills to come, I will specifically address one critical issue to the vitality of Amador County, which affects thousands of its residents. In the middle of my chemotherapy treatments for breast cancer, I was informed our HMO would no longer cover medical services in Amador and El Dorado counties. I was told to drive over an hour away to Sacramento to find services. It was difficult enough living locally, or driving locally, for the grueling treatments, lab work, follow-ups, not to mention the confidence I had with a team of specialists. I couldn't imagine driving even further. My husband's employer offers one of the best employment packages available, but our 6 medical plans, out of 6 medical plans, 5 of them would not serve the zip codes in Amador. a common problem to most small counties in California. Only one PPO plan could I use to prevent transferring to a whole new set of doctors and risk changing treatment. For 5 years, until I was safely in a remission, my husband and I had to pay thousands of dollars out of pocket, which we could barely afford to ensure that I got the same treatment. Many living in Amador are in the same predicament for a simple checkup or other medical needs. No patient, healthy or unhealthy, should be forced out of their county, preventing the comfort and confidence they find in local medical services. Writing letters to legislators, the insurance commissioner, were left without response nor concern. In a phone call to the insurance commissioner's office, I was informed they couldn't and wouldn't help, as this is the way it was regulated. The state insurance commissioner needs to follow the leadership of other states who have told health insurance companies, if you don't provide coverage for all of our areas in our state, you won't be selling any health insurance to any resident in our state. The commissioner has that ability, but the health insurance industry is in the politicians' pockets because that doesn't happen and could have been resolved 13 years ago. I've been advocating for cancer patients regarding this issue for 13 years. Nothing has changed. This single issue alone has enslaved us to the legislators of California. They don't care about rural counties plagued by these problems, or they could change it very easily. I've come to the realization it's a battle that won't be won in California. It's just not possible the way it's been running. This one issue affects Amador's economy by millions of dollars in medical services going to outside counties, money that would increase better medical services for us and create hundreds of jobs desperately needed in our county. It would improve the health of those who would be more apt to visit a doctor nearby than have to travel an hour elsewhere. Amador County has been rendered powerless to protect its residents regarding many issues mandated by the state. Medical insurance is only one of those issues. There's no way to fight the odds. There's no way to fight when the odds are 117-6 in legislators and protect our way of life from our own front lines. Our voices have been muted by legislators who discriminate against equality, but legislators ignore our protections for those rights in California. My spouse and I, native Californians, watching over the years, the state has virtually divided into two different cultures, one not supporting the other in rural lifestyle. Because no solution is available to resolve our issues, I believe a greater power needs to be given to the county to protect the rights of the people. My question to you as a board, what other option is there in resolving issues such as Medicare or other issues to protect your people when there is unfair representation? It's my request of the Board of Supervisors to hear this sincere plea. Please vote for the State of Jefferson in order to protect those you were elected to serve. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wasn't going to speak.
Glad to
Come
hear
more often.
A couple of years ago,
Glad to hear we motivate you so. Okay.
I know, a couple of years ago, I'm a proud member of the Plymouth Foothill Rotary. And the first year that we had the Plymouth Foothill Rotary, a friend of Sheriff Martin Ryan, who I have a great deal of respect for him and his family, the head of the Department of Drug Enforcement Action, the DEA, came to speak to our Rotary. And he was talking about medical marijuana and all sorts of issues like she brought up, that we don't have health care under our insurance at the state level. But one thing he said to me struck me very hard. He said, we're controlled by San Francisco and LA. And I thought, well, he's probably right. They've got the bigger populations when you look at it. But next thing came, Proposition 8, the repeal of the Gay Marriage Act. It wasn't controlled by San Francisco and LA. That went down. So I'm not so sure it always goes down on party lines. So that really struck me, that if you think that this is a real liberal state, They brought up Proposition 8, which denied a lot of people benefits. So I'm not saying it always happens that way. I've always lived in a conservative state, and I've always been proud to be a liberal. You've just got to fight your way, and that's what you do. Thank you.
Carolyn, I'll tell you, though, when it comes to elections for candidates, that D and that R really matter, and that was pointed out more than anything else when, and I'm drawing a blank on his last name, Lewis, from Santa Cruz, Bruce.
Kawasaki, being for governor.
No, he was our Secretary of State. And did a, McPherson. Bruce McPherson. Did a fabulous job as Secretary of State, and he's a moderate Republican, but when he went to run again, that D and that R mattered, and he lost no matter, it didn't matter what kind of job you did in the end. It just mattered that he was had a Republican stated on the ballot, so he lost.
And I understand that, Mr. Forrester, especially when you see the maps on the television that they talk about blue states and red states. And my brother from Idaho says, oh, you're lucky you're in a blue state. I said, look where I'm at. Right down the middle, it's all red. You know, there's large pockets of more population that are blue but are red. But I just think that this really needs to be thought out, because I'm not sure that we, as a small community, could have an oncology center and could have, you know, I think bigger and stronger. Driving an hour might be better than having inferior health here.
But that was the insurance companies that made that decision.
Yeah, and a few years ago, we had the insurance commissioner come and talk to the Democratic committee, and we were up at Rancheria, and he said, we've got to get health insurance under the Department of Insurance. We can't let these big health care companies control us. So I think that's one avenue to help the wonderful lady that went through that horrible ordeal, and I know a lot of people that run that long line to cancer. So I think putting cancer under the Department of Insurance would help. It's not even in the big blue states. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jerry Curtis from Upcountry. I'd like to say that I want to learn more about this, but I have seen a pattern of the big cities who have gotten themselves so far in debts through different kinds of economic development type programs that we have been passed back from the state to local counties, a lot of the state responsibilities, because they could no longer handle the fact of the cost of the debts that were done under these programs, along with other high costs going on. We have had the state send back to local government, which increased our cost and reduced our services to pay for the costs that they should have been paying for. And that comes down from prisons and other type programs like that we have seen. So as long as the big cities continue those processes, we're stuck, because this is an equal protection rights situation under the 14th Amendment, where I think there is a challenge legally as well. Maybe we can't do it politically, but there is, under the 14th Amendment, and when it first came about, it was to give equal protection to the slaves in the South. And the Democrats were all upset because, or excited because they thought they would get more representation by doing it by population. But to keep it equal for the northern states, they decided on the proportion of the Senate versus the Assembly, like in California, type for population representation, and had help to equalize the representation rights of all. So I hope you will really look at this, because there are financial detriments that are going to come and hit us, and they're going to be, the more the state passes back to us to take care of their responsibility, the higher costs will come to us local taxpayers. Thank you.
I've got a question, and maybe
Ma'am, please wait till everybody's spoken.
this is probably one of the folks from proposing this. When I first saw this, and it's been a few years ago, there was some counties in Oregon that wanted to succeed. Are they still interested in the head shake? Yeah.
That indication was given at the San Andreas meeting that I attended, but I think they're staying focused, because there's added complications with that. I think they're staying focused on just California
Yeah, I
right
was just
now.
curious, because when I first saw
the
it.
list here.
The 7 lower counties in Oregon, what happens is with our counties, we have to go to our state. In Oregon, they have to go to their state to separate. Right now, there's Josephine County is on board, Klamath County is on board, and
Jackson.
Jackson.
Jackson, yeah.
Yeah.
Jackson's a big marijuana growing county up there, I think.
So is Humboldt.
Well, yeah, all of them up there.
Humboldt's one of ours. So yes, they're also.
Mendocino, et cetera.
Well, thank you. Any other members of the public?
Hi, Carol Carlson
Hello?
from Pioneer. And I applaud you for wanting to get more information about this and not making any rash decisions. And I would just ask you to allow the nonpartisan PAC, Keep It California, to be on your agenda in the future, so that we can give you the financial viability of this also, and some of the reasons why you should not consider this. Thank you.
Bennett, I urge all of you to support the state of Jackson, and I would hope that a unanimous Jefferson, I'm sorry. Thank you. Unanimous resolution would be passed. I don't need to repeat the issues and that were cited in your discussion here, particularly the forests, or the reasons for needing this. Now, we pay a fire tax here. What's the LA earthquake tax? I am tired of carpetbagger state legislators trying to tell us what to do with our water. When I got involved in opposing Wild and Scenic, I read an article in a Bay Area newspaper, and it reinforced what I thought was going on. We are being marginalized. We can talk issue after issue after issue, but we are being marginalized here in Amador County, and people in the Bay Area see us to change their bed linen and wash their dishes when they come here on weekends. That's the future they see for us. And that article in that Bay Area newspaper reinforced that. They articulated it very precisely. I wrote a counter article. I sent it to every Bay Area newspaper, including some that were allegedly conservative. None of them would publish it. They did, however, publish articles from the Bay Area fifth column within Amador County, the Foothill Conservancy. So I think that makes it very clear. We have no rights, and we will lose them continually. Now, whether the state of Jefferson really is going to work, I don't know. I won't venture a guess. But I think this movement sends the right message, and the sooner we send it, the better off we'll be. Thank you.
signing paper here. My name's Sheila Wantoric from Fiddletown.
There's no sign-in paper? There should be. Somebody must have grabbed it.
So, thank you so much for even bringing this as the agenda.
We have the guilty party coming for Sheila.
Okay, good.
Charge me all you want.
Thank you.
I have attended El Dorado County Supervisor meetings. I've been at the state capitol numerous times, and I can completely agree that you can take the day off, you can go down to these representatives and leave completely frustrated and discouraged. The other thing I want to point out, it's so wonderful to have gray hair, because as gray hairs, we have already lived and enjoyed our life, right? We've enjoyed our businesses, we own homes, we love living in this rural area. We've been the recipients of that. But we're going forward. I purposely brought my children today, actually some of my children, and this is an excellent government lesson. Every time I've gone to the state, I have brought my children, because we need to go as citizens to see actually what our representatives are doing. I've been so encouraged. We've only been in Amador County a couple years. We lived in El Dorado County for 24 years, and we were in all the way at the South County, El Dorado County, and now we are all the way in North County, Amador County. But prior to that, I was born and raised in Southern California, and we left and have never looked back. We would never want to go back. We lived on 5 acres in Orange County. You know, who's ever heard of that? So I had a wonderful childhood living in that nice rural area, but wow, has it changed. And so my parents moved to Northern California. We later followed, my husband and I, and we've raised our children here. Back to the gray hair, I recognize when we discuss this Jefferson State, and actually part of the thanking you is that this is very new to us as a family as well. We're on the research team with you as well, trying to figure out what is this and what does it represent. So far, listening to Mark Baird, it's taking Constitution 101. His second speech was basically on studying the legal aspects. I remember being in the 70s and 80s going, what is redistricting? Now I'm understanding a little bit more of what it is and why my vote hasn't counted. So when we came to this rural area, our desire was not to live here and not have our children live here. So of my children, I've only married off one, and she moved to Alaska. And I said, you don't have any desire to come back? Never to California. All of my children want to leave California. And I think if you asked yourself, your own children, your neighbors, what is the sustainability? I'll use that environmental term. What is the sustainability of our county? You know what sustainability means? It means, do your children want to stay? Do your children have an opportunity to stay? To work in the county, to support the county, what industry is in the county, can they afford to live in the county? So there is no sustainability. And that's why when we present Jefferson State, most of you are very depressed. Oh, that'll never happen. Oh, we can't do that. You know what, I've taken the attitude of, I don't know if it can happen, but you know what, when I look at my children's faces, I have to give them hope. I have to give them vision. I have to go back to say, you know what our country was founded on was so awesome, and it actually still works. It does work. It is we the people. And you know, the first, and I would look to county council, the first line of defense for the citizens is our local government. And what do we do when our rights are violated? because unconstitutional laws are passed. What is our right? Well, you know what our right is? It's our local government. And it's our local county council to evaluate the laws, whether or not they're constitutional or not. Just one of them today, the water rights issue, that people are coming on property and determining what you can or can't do with a pond. I think if all of us thought with half a minute, is that a constitutional law? So these are all things that I just really, I've been so encouraged with the last 2 meetings. I've only been to 2 so far. I hope to attend more, but I think it's great that you are here, you are listening, you're having dialogue, you're listening to the people. I'm very encouraged to be in Amador County, and I want to be very hopeful and visionary with my children. And we live in a great country, and we live in a beautiful place. And so just one other thing, too, I think Jefferson State, when you declare, it doesn't mean you're declaring that you're in favor of it. My understanding from John DiAgostini, who's the sheriff of El Dorado County, is that if you declare, all it's saying is that we have the right to sit at the table to be a part of the discussion of what this is going to look for. It really is not declaring a for or against position. So thank you so much for listening to us, and I would request that you would consider it.
Well, thank you. You know, I will say one thing. It's one Turek.
One Torek. One Torek.
One Torek. You know, I've seen your kids around the community for a few years now, and I remember first few times I saw them, I commented to him. He said, "Those are some really nice kids." And he said, "Oh, yeah, some family out of El Dorado." So that was probably going back 4 or 5 years ago. But you have some real nice kids, and we're glad to see they moved to Amador County.
Yeah, we're here now.
I've got to ask the kids something. Where's Mom taking you to lunch?
They had Subway here in town.
All right.
Yeah. Any questions for my children, they would gladly answer.
Yeah, and I hear what you're saying about hope for your children. My daughter lives in North Carolina, and I'm fortunate I have my son is still in Amador County, and he's got a pretty good job, and hopefully he'll be able to stay here. But yeah. I know what you're saying. It just breaks my wife's heart and my heart to have our daughter so far out on the East Coast. But there was little or no opportunity for her, so she went where the money is.
I just have a question, and I understand you're still in a learning curve, as we all are.
Yes.
But you mentioned that there's no sustainability in this county, and so my question to you is, how do you believe becoming the state of Jefferson would help that issue?
Well, primarily it's property rights. We ran a small family farm in El Dorado County, and we were very instrumental in getting the food ordinance passed in El Dorado County, which gives local farmers the right to produce from the farm and to distribute to their community. It's a direct farming relationship. Now, the state of California and the federal government has said that it is not the right of an individual to choose what to eat, that it is the state and federal government's responsibility to regulate all food, and that means everything and anything that you produce on the farm. Your vegetables, if you bake a pie and you want to sell it to a neighbor, oh no, you cannot do that unless the federal government or the state is involved. And so through the food ordinance